Hey everyone, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to four-wheel drive swap my 1967 crew cab truck over here. Hopefully by the end of this episode we're going to have this Snow Fighter front axle under the front of this thing. We have a lot of work to do, so let's get after it. All right, guys, like I said, we're going to be four-wheel drive swapping my 1967 crew cab here. It is originally a two-wheel drive truck, so it has the twin traction beams underneath it. Coil springs, coil buckets, all that stuff's going to go away. And we're going to replace it with this, a 78, 79 Dana 60 Snow Fighter axle. This is a much beefier axle than like what a highboy had or anything like that. One thing is different is it is a high pinion, so we got a high pinion front end there, and it's a Dana 60, so a lot bigger axle. And this one is left over from my it's not really left over. I took it off of my highboy crew cab truck because I'm putting that truck back to 100% original, so we took the Snow Fighter out of it since it's not original to the truck, and we're going to utilize it in this 67 since it's kind of a resto mod type build with the Godzilla engine. And yeah, I think it'll be a good front axle for this truck, kind of a vintage feel with the leaf springs and the old school Dana 60, but still a little bit modern with nice disc brakes, and we're gonna have power steering on it and everything like that. So it'll be a fun swap and be a good way to get this truck four-wheel drive swapped nice and easy, relatively speaking. My plan so far is I want to use this replacement highboy Crossmember. This is from Vintage Truck and 4x4. It's a really nice Crossmember they make for the highboy trucks. A lot of times on the highboys, these are all beat up because people like hook chains on them and stuff and try to yank the truck, and they are not beefy enough for that kind of action. So they're always bent up. The hole here is always ripped out, something along those lines. But the reason I'm using that is because it's going to be visible under the bumper of the truck here. The way the highboys are made, the Crossmember is visible under the bumper, and the bumper's not on this truck, but it has this piece welded on there. That's not normally there on a two-wheel drive, but I'm going to be putting that underneath the bumper there, so it has the look of a highboy. So that's the reason we're using this. Otherwise, I'd just be using some channel iron or angle iron or something of that nature. I also got these leaf spring brackets here to go in here to simulate the highboy style as well, because these are visible. But I goofed up and I ordered 3-inch instead of 3.5-inch. The highboy springs are 3-inch, so that's what I was thinking. I didn't even get a tape measure out, so I ordered 3-inch, but you got to count for the bushing, the width of the bushing there, and it's actually a 3.5-inch. You need a 3.5-inch bracket for the spring bushing. This axle has these Super Duty leaf springs on it, and I have these highboy leaf springs here because I'm considering using highboy springs instead of these Super Duty springs. For a couple of reasons. These, here, I'll demonstrate. See the difference there. The width is the same as the leaf spring, but I didn't get the right width for the bracket. But I think we're going to make these work. I'm probably going to cut them up because I'm going to be ending up welding everything on this Crossmember instead of bolting it on like a highboy, since it's not, the holes and everything aren't there for the bracket. We're going to be beefing up the frame so that all this is strong enough. So anyway, what I'm saying is I'm going to be welding this instead of bolting it, so I think it'll work. But back to these leaf springs. As far as, I can't find any markings on them because they've been sandblasted and painted, but I think they are 4-inch lift Pro Comp leaf springs for a 99 to 04 Super Duty. And the problem with that is, for one, I don't know the spring rate, and two, even the lowest spring rate is still way higher than we really need for this setup. So it's probably going to be a little rough riding, is my my worry with those leaf springs. And they are a different dimension than the highboy springs, and I'm worried that it's going to bring the front hanger too far out in the front, and it's going to look goofy sticking out under the bumper, because the dimensions from center axle to the front of the leaf spring is different than the highboys. So I'm thinking about using highboy springs. I have these old wore out ones here just to use for mock-up. If I do end up getting the highboy springs, I think I'm going to get like a 2-inch leaf spring. So but I kind of wanted to get it set up before I ordered springs in case I wanted higher or lower, you know, somewhere in between. First order of business is going to be changing these leaf springs out, and then we're going to get into pulling out the front suspension on this truck. So that'll be fun. We're going to yank everything out of this truck that's two-wheel drive related and start putting the four-wheel drive stuff underneath it. So let's get after it. All right, I'm getting ready to pull all the two-wheel drive suspension stuff off of this truck and get it ready to four-wheel drive swap it. And I decided just to yank the cab off because I have to do it anyway. And I have most of the stuff disconnected, so I'm going to yank the cab off and make it easier to pull the engine and transmission, and also make it easier to get to all the bolts and nuts and everything to get the suspension off. So, going to just pick the cab up, pull everything off, and then when I go back to four-wheel drive swap it, I'm going to put the cab back on. But I have everything ready to pull off, I think. There's a lot of stuff that I always forget, like parking brake cable and that kind of stuff, the clutch linkage. I have all that taken care of. Hopefully we don't have any problems. I have it all set up. We'll see if I forgot anything. Okay, I think we're separated in the back. We are. The core support hasn't started coming up yet, but they are loose. Hopefully we're not too front heavy. I haven't ever picked up a cab. Here we're picked up on the front cab mount, but we're picked up a little bit on the core support. I guess I'll give it a few more bumps. Make sure. Yeah, we're moving. Now I like to just double check and make sure we don't have anything in tension. We look good over here. There's not much over here. I think we'll go up some more and see if we run into any problems. Yeah, we look good. Let's see, here's where most of the stuff is. That is your speedometer cable. Clutch is free. What do we got there? Reverse lights, those are unhooked. What's that? Brake lines, they're unhooked from the master. Yep. I think so far we're good. I don't see anything that's tight yet. I think at this point, if we had something that was still attached, we would be seeing it, but it's always good to still check and make sure everything's clearing. So you have that inner fender there to clear. Looks like that's what made some noise there, I heard. I think we're just about home free. That guy's hooked. Battery hold down, there we go. Bungee cord. Let's give it a few more inches. We'll check on it again. Check back here. I always like to make sure my arm isn't going to hit the bed. Looks like we're good there. It's not even touching on this side. That's great. Why is that not touching? We'll figure that out later. I think we're good to go all the way up. Sure it's not going to be teetery. I might get a ratchet strap and ratchet this corner down. Alright, that makes me feel much better. Not very much tension it took it to start touching. I think it was just a unevenness on my arms that was causing the problem, but... Well, there we go. Nothing to it. Didn't have any major problems. That's always good. I'm going to get to stripping down all the two-wheel drive stuff. Probably pull the engine first. Let's take a peek under here. Oh, somebody torched a big hole there. That'll have to be patched. Look how nice those rockers are. It's pretty darn nice. And the channels in here that like to rot out on these screws. Pretty nice. All right, I'm gonna get to yanking this two-wheel drive stuff off, and we'll catch back up with you guys later. All right, well, I got the engine pulled out and the transmission. Got a few things like the steering gear pulled off and just kind of getting it ready to four-wheel drive, swap it, and get everything pulled off. But before I do that, I'm going to take it outside, and we're going to steam clean the frame and just clean up all of this 50 years of dirt and grime off of this frame and get it all cleaned up, and we're ready to start taking stuff apart. All right, guys, well, it's time to pick back up on the 67 crew cab project I've been working on. It's been about 2 weeks since I worked on it, and it's mainly been because of the ultimate crew cab back there, and I did the 8x6.5 conversion on those axles. That was a fun project. I spent a lot of time on it, and I was kind of involved in it for a while, and kind of quit working on the 67, but now I'm back on it. I want to fill you guys in with everything I've been doing. Last time you saw the frame, we were I had the engine and everything pulled out, and it still had all the suspension and everything on it. And since then, I have yanked off all the suspension, all the coil buckets, the brackets for the beams, and the radius arms, and the engine mounts, and stripped everything down to get ready to convert it. Now, another reason I have been kind of putting this project off is because I've had some shipping issues with leaf springs. I went ahead and got Skyjacker 2-inch lift springs for highboys. You can see it here compared to a factory highboy spring, just a couple inches taller to give this thing a little bit higher stance. But as you can see, there is only one here. So had some issues with shipping. One of my leaf springs got lost in Texarkana, and I only got one. And then when I contacted the company I got them from, and try to get a replacement done, and by the time you jump through all the hoops to finally get them to send you a replacement, they were out of stock. So now I have one leaf spring and waiting on the replacement. I don't know when it'll get here. So unfortunately, we're kind of at a standstill with a four-wheel drive swap, but I'm going to move forward with it anyway because I do have little things I can do. I'm going to mount the cab back on the frame so I can pick the frame up with the lift and start working on the four-wheel drive swap there with the lift up with the cab on the frame. And I also want to put the cab on the frame to align the wheel in the wheel well, because I was going to mark the center of the wheel well, or the wheels, before I took the two-wheel drive suspension off, but I forgot. So now I'm going to put the cab back on it and just make sure the wheels are aligned. I'm going to kind of mock it up with these leaf springs, even though they are different. If I really get into it and want to start doing things, I could put those stock springs on it and make it work with those, but I'd much rather do it with the springs that are going to be on it. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to get to putting the cab back on here. It's just going to be standard, line it back up and drop it down, and then I'll pick it back up and we'll inspect some things on the frame. All right, well, I have the cab back on the frame, and I have our front axle rolled up under the truck. Now it's just sitting there. The frame is touching the leaf springs. It just kind of to get a general idea of how this thing's going to fit in here. And you can see the massive difference between that front end and the rear end. See, that axle's hanging all the way down, hanging off the ground, and it's still, what is that, 10 inches off the ground, and this one's just now touching. But I am glad I am not using these leaf springs. I kind of thought about maybe using these leaf springs, but then I was worried it was going to sit up too high, and I'm glad I made the decision to get those Skyjackers. This is a little bit higher up than I was intending this project to be. We are going to be running bigger tires. I'm not sure what tires we're running yet, but they're going to be bigger than these, just standard 750 16s. But still, it's pretty darn high off the ground. Now, I don't mind a lifted truck, but I prefer it to be a little bit lower, easier to get into, and a lower center of gravity. Just the way I prefer things, so I'm going to build it the way I like it. And the Skyjacker springs are probably going to be a good 6 to 10 inches lower than this. Well, maybe not that much, but probably 6. I'm hoping we get the tire up to about here. So we'll see how it turns out when I get those springs back in. But you can kind of see we are probably going to have clearance issues with the crossmember. But I'm planning on notching that crossmember for the differential there. So that'll be good. I can do that while we're waiting on leaf springs. And with this high pinion there, you can kind of see that crossmember that goes under the transmission. It's right here. With a high pinion front differential, your drive shaft is going to get awful close to that. So I think, especially if we had a married transmission or transfer case, that crossmember would have to go. I think I took that out on my Ultimate Highboy because it has this, not a snow fighter, but it has a 93 Dana 60, which is basically the same high pinion, and a married transfer case, a married 205, and that crossmember was right in the way. So I think we're going to get away from that by having a divorced transfer case. I have a rebuilt 205 I think we'll put in here, and that lowers the drive shaft point down on the frame, and it gives you more clearance there for the that front crossmember. We'll see how that goes once we get the new leaf springs in and see how where that differential ends up. We might still have to either modify that crossmember or take it out. So we'll see how that turns out. But for now, I'm glad we got this thing on the frame and kind of got a good idea of the height. And I'm glad I went with the springs I did. Next step is I'm going to take this axle back out of here. And things like this right here, I'm going to clean up this piece that was welded in the frame. And just other odds and ends stuff to try to get this thing ready for when those leaf springs do show up. I can get going on it. So I'm going to get after that stuff. Alright guys, well I have the axle back under the truck. I got those spots under the frame cleaned up like I said I was going to. And I am tired of waiting on that leaf spring I'm missing. So I yanked some stock highboy leaf springs off of another project. So these are new reproduction stock height highboy springs. And you can really tell the height difference. So this would be kind of stock highboy without any weight on it. So basically there's no weight on the springs. They're just kind of sitting there. So there's no engine. The body isn't even sitting on the axles. So it would be a little bit lower than this, but this kind of gives you an idea. This is probably around about what the ride height is going to be with those 2.5 inch or 2-inch lift springs from Skyjacker, hopefully. This was generally the look I was going for, but I have the front crossmember kind of mocked up. I have some brackets right here to hold the leaf spring kind of just tacked in. It's not attached to the frame. They're just tacked in and attached to the leaf springs there. So that's kind of the look I'm going for. It's going to look kind of like a highboy front crossmember here. Now the highboy front frame horns look a lot different than these. They do not have the bumper bracket built into them. And they actually end a little bit sooner there. And then they have a bracket that the bumper hooks on. So it does look a little different without the bumper on it, but hopefully with the bumper, I'm going to hang one on here to make sure, but hopefully with the bumper, the front's going to look pretty close to a highboy. So that's going to be pretty cool. Another thing, since I have these stock leaf springs on here, you can see the problem with the engine crossmember and why the highboys don't have these. It's touching the differential right there, and we're not even, we're touching the frame. So we're right about where it would hit just at ride height here. So gonna have to cut all of this, the back piece of this crossmember out and notch it and then reinforce it to clear the differential. And the front, I might have to notch it a little bit. I'm gonna put a different, I'm gonna put a stock diff cover on that so it looks more stock, and it might give us a little bit more room there, but we'll see. I definitely don't want that hitting, so I might notch that crossmember there as well in the front. But that's nothing we can't do. But with these shorter leaf springs, it is definitely more apparent. On the back, we got to add a shackle mount there. I'll do that once the other springs arrive, I believe, just so everything is set up correctly with the springs we have. So this is just roughly set in there, very roughly, you know, just went under there to see all the issues I'm going to run into. So really what I'm waiting for is that other leaf spring so I can do this for real. But I'm going to get this crossmember, the front leaf spring cross member all welded up and kind of figured out where I want it, and I might weld that in, because really that's what sets the location of your axle. So as long as I have it in the correct spot, that shouldn't change at any point. It just needs to be square with the frame, and the leaf springs need to be, the center of the leaf springs need to be center of the wheel opening. So I'm gonna get messing with that kind of stuff, and I'll bring you guys along for the interesting parts, and I'm gonna get after it. Okay guys, we're here the next day, and if you might notice, the truck is sitting up just slightly higher. Just as luck would have it, actually the same day that I spent all that time yanking these stock highboy leaf springs off of a truck that was already assembled, the other leaf spring showed up, and I didn't even know it was on the way. So that's unfortunate, but I'm glad it's here in the end. I wasted all that time yanking those other leaf springs off when I could have just waited a few more hours and it would have been here, but that's the way it goes sometimes. But I do have both of the new Skyjactor 2-inch lift springs installed, and I'm really happy with the height. This is a little higher than I was wanting, but remember, there is no weight on here. It's basically just touching the leaf springs because everything's not mounted yet. I just lowered the body down to touch the leaf springs, so there's no weight of the engine, and there's not even a weight of the frame or the body on these springs. So they will compress some once all that weight is on there. And I went out and measured my ultimate highboy truck, my white 67, and I really love the stance on that truck. And from the center of the axle to the edge of the fender, it is right at 26 inches, where this truck, the way it is currently sitting, is at 28 inches. So we only have to drop 2 inches for it to be the same height as that truck, and I think that is very doable with once we put every bit of weight on this axle that it's going to see. So right now it's 0, so we're going to be putting an engine and the whole body and suspension and everything. So hopefully those springs, I don't know if they'll compress the full 2 inches, but it'll get close. We'll just have to see how that turns out. I also did weld up the front cross member, and I added a bumper on here to see what it looks like. Now it's not welded to the frame, but it is welded up. The pieces in it are welded up. But this is kind of where it's going to be. And you can see it sticking out under the bumper there like it would on a highboy truck. So that makes me really happy. And I also welded in some, these are just some carriage head bolts, because this cross member had holes here for the rivets where you would put a bolt, basically if you're replacing this cross member on a highboy truck. But since I'm not doing that, I welded in these carriage head bolts, and just to make it look like a rivet, just to kind of give it the stock appearance. But I have found a few more issues with doing this setup with a two-wheel drive frame truck. Mainly it is the frame here kicks up and goes up, where the highboy frame is completely flat on the bottom here. So that is definitely an issue with using this cross member here like this, because without, I put a piece of 3/16 up here as a spacer, and without doing that, this cross member here looks like it's tilted up like this, because basically it is, and it just looked goofy. So I'm gonna have to figure out a good way to get that kind of where it needs to be without adding too much stuff in between, and trying to make it look as clean as possible. So I'm going to work on that solution and see what I come up with there. Right now, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, since it is, I mean, it's probably going to be a good half inch up here where it needs to come down, and then like touching back here. So I have yet to see what I'm going to do there. I'm probably going to mess with that when I'm going to take it off of the leaf springs and mess with it that way, so it'd be easier to mess with, basically. But I think it's pretty much where it needs to be. I'm pretty happy with that, and all my measurements, measuring everything 3 and 4 times to make sure the axle is square with the truck. That is one thing that's kind of hard to do on a setup like this, because if you're doing link suspension like I did on my Ultimate Highboy, you just adjust the links and get your axle square. But it all depends on that location right there is the main one that locates your leaf springs and thus locates your axle. But I think we're pretty good. I'm going to reference points like the cab mount here off of a highboy truck, and the measurements of that the bolt to that cab mount and that kind of stuff. I didn't find anything in between here that was the same, but I think that cab mount should be identical. So we'll see how that goes, and then once I get the front cross member located and welded in place, then I'll work on the rear shackles, because those are less important because they move with the leaf spring. But anyway, guys, I'm going to get after the figuring out what I'm going to do here. I'll fill you guys in when I come up with a plan. Alright guys, well, I have the axle back underneath, or out of it, out from underneath it, and I have the Crossmember up here by itself, maybe give you guys a little bit better view of the frame here since it kicks up. You see it kind of kicks up slightly. The highboy frame is all flat right here, so that's why this crossmember is flat, and it's kind of square, you know, to keep it flat. Now I could just pop this up all the way and just weld it. It would make a nice, easy welding solution and bracket, you know, placement. But then that front face of that crossmember just kicks up like that, and I just think it doesn't look quite right. I've seen other trucks that have done it that way. I think it would function just fine, and really it would look, you know, 90% of the part. But I put a bumper up there, and just trying to eyeball it and figure out what I want to do, and I just think it looks goofy. So I think I'm going to try to weld it in with this, with it flat like this. Now I'm going to come in and weld a piece back here that's missing, but I'm going to come down and step it down so that it is not contacting the frame there and getting in a way, so we can kind of tuck it up in here a little bit better and French it up on the frame just ever so slightly. But up here where I have the frame difference there, I'm not sure how exactly I'm going to make that up. It's not enough that I really need to build up the frame in any way. I think what I'm going to end up doing is just spacing this out slightly, and then just weld it all in solid once I get that all sorted out. Another thing about these two-wheel drive frames that isn't great for this is it has this massive cutout right here, if you can see that. So it gets real thin up here at the end, but I'm going to weld all this in, and it should all be solid and really good. And I'm also going to put a strengthening brace up here like the highboys had as well. So it's going to be gusseted up like this. So I'm going to get this crossmember out of here, weld in the back piece, and I'm going to try to figure out a solution for this shim part thing, this area up here, and then I'll catch back with you guys when I have a solution there to show you. Well, I have kind of a solution for the gap problem. Basically, I just stacked some different layers of strap iron or different sizes of strap iron to make that angle down. I think it worked pretty good. There is, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good, I think. It'll work for sure. There's lots of room here to make a nice, good weld bead all the way around this thing. I've measured about 50 times. I think it is pretty close. Actually, it's as close as I can tell with a tape measure anyway. I have it centered side to side, and I also have it aligned front to back, going off measurements from a highboy. What I ended up doing was measuring off of this cab mount, right down here at the corner, actually, right at this corner all the way to the front, and went off of that. But I'm not just relying solely on that. I am now going to, well, now I'm going to tack this in place just good enough to hold it, and then I'm going to mount the axle on it, drop the frame back down and put the axle on it, and see where the leaf springs line up back here. So that'll tell me the further away I get from this point, the more exaggerated the misalignment will be. So on those leaf springs way back there, I'll be able to see it on the frame if I'm misaligned. And basically I'll align it that way as well, and checking that the axle is square with the frame. So I got to get after all of that. So I'm just going to tack this thing in place, and then mess with trying to get this leaf spring attached and the axle attached, and see how we come out. All right, we'll have the axle back under the truck, and the truck's sitting on the ground, and it's actually on the entire weight of it is on the axles. I have the rear one's blocked up because the front's obviously higher, but it turned out really good. I'm pretty happy with the result. Let me show you what we're going to be looking at. Here is the back of the leaf spring. If you can see that, it's just barely sticking out from the frame. And then over here on the other side is doing the same. So I'm really happy with the alignment, you know, side to side. And I haven't checked squareness of the axle. I am going to do that next. It's going to be pretty hard to do, but I'll be measuring basically from the corners, try to find a reference point as best as I can, and a reference point off the frame, and measure that. But pretty happy with how it turned out. The axle is a little bit farther forward, you know, just going off the eye. But you have to remember, as weight gets on this truck, the axle moves back because of that shackle. So as the spring compresses, the point will go kind of that way. Instead of, you know, straight up and down, it kind of goes back. So the axle is going to go back as the weight gets on it. So something to keep in mind. But, you know, I went off of just what the factory highboy would be. So hopefully that all sorts itself out as we put weight on it. We'll see how that goes when we get engine and everything installed here, but so far pretty happy with it. Just going to double check everything and make sure everything's perfect, and then I'm going to burn that crossmember in for good. Alright, so I have the crossmember fully welded in here. I have the cab picked up, as you saw. That's just to get some better access in here and give me more room since the locating of the axle part is done. The cab was pretty much just in the way at that point. But I did get it all welded up solid, and I did add some support braces in here, just some C-channel. It's not does not look like the original, but it's going to be tucked up in here where you can't see it, so it does the job well. That will just give the frame some structural rigidity, and keep from wanting to twist like that. If you get into a flexi situation and the leaf springs are torquing on this arm right here, or the mount, keeps your frame rails from wanting to twist like that, I think is the intended purpose there. So the next step is pretty much just drill a hole in the right spot, which is not as easy as it would seem, but it is easier than locating the front for sure. My goal right now, I don't have the bushing. Alright, I have my bushing that I'm going to use here. I have a hole saw here and a bushing, and my plan is to locate the correct spot in the frame where this goes. Use the hole saw and drill a 2-inch hole, and then put this in there where it goes. You know, it's going to be sticking out a little bit out of the frame there like that, and then weld up the outside, and then weld up the inside, and then I'm just going to put some gussets on the inside as well and weld those to the frame to keep it help it keep from twisting as well. And that should be good for that. The original highboy trucks had a cast piece that was riveted to the frame here, and you can actually get replacements here, but I don't think it's, you know, the highboy perfect representation isn't really important here, since it's obviously a 2-wheel drive frame. So welding in these things is going to be a lot easier and cheaper, and get the same result. So right now I think it's just going to be locating that hole and get the holes drilled out, and then get these things in there and weld them in and make sure they're the same width in and out, and then pretty much we will be installed. I did mess around with the steering a little bit. I have the drag link on here. This is the way it was set up on the highboy truck that this axle came out of. It does have these high steer arms up here, which would move your tie rod up here to this point for an off-road situation. Your tie rod is tucked up way up here out of the way, and won't interfere with rocks or anything on the trail. But it won't work with these leaf springs because it would go right through the leaf springs. So basically using it down here on the factory tie rod locations, but I am using this upper point for the drag link for the steering. And I have a Super Duty steering gear that I'm planning on welding in right here, making a bracket and boxing this frame in. But that's going to get the tie rod out like this, and then we start getting into the leaf spring. So I don't think it would hit right now, but once the leaf spring articulates up, we might run into problems. So what I might end up doing is notching this and allowing that steering gear to move forward some. Haven't got that far yet, but that's just going to be some more fiddling we'll have to do later on. But for now, I'm going to get this axle finished mounting up and weld in those shackle mounting points for the frame, and then the axle will be fully installed. Well, I have all the holes cut, so that went really well. It is a very tight fit in here, so that is good. I like that tight fit. That will help it keep it in the correct location and everything square. So next step is going to get these things located, cleaning up the frame, and then we'll weld them in. Alright, so here's what I came up with for the frame mounts for the shackles. These little spaceship looking deals. You can pretty much see my thought process there. We have the gussets, and then we have this bottom piece there to weld it to the frame. I think this will be very strong. And gonna weld it up in there, you know, like so. And we have a little bit of a lip here to weld around. Because of the way these are designed with the poly bushings, I really didn't have much room to stick this out. I wanted it stuck out like a 1/4 inch or more, so you can have a really good weld on the inside and the outside. But the way this is made, I just didn't have enough room for the shackles to have room. So it is what it is. I might TIG weld the outside there, just because we have such limited room to work with there, and I can be a lot more precise with that TIG welder. And we'll see how it goes. I'll probably weld the inside first and see how that goes, and might drag the big TIG welder over here and get it burned in. But made the same one for this other side. So yeah, that should be plenty strong. Hopefully they're in the right spot. I think they are. I made them identical and they both fit the same perfect in there. So hopefully everything's good there. Once it's all welded in, I think the axle is completely installed. But we got a lot of welding to do on these pieces. I'm going to get after it. Alright, so here we go. We have it all welded up. I ended up just doing a MIG weld on the outside because it was welding so good. I just went ahead and burned it in, and it worked pretty good. There is a little bit I'll have to clean up because I don't want that bushing riding on that. Not that I think it would really matter. It would just kind of tear up the bushing a little bit. But I'll clean that surface up, make sure it's nice and flat. And then on the inside here, we got it all welded up. Now my design was a little bit problematic with the bottom. It would have been better to probably angle the braces, the gussets up a little bit to give me more access to weld. But I did get it done. It's just kind of tight in there with them the way I have it, which they're supposed to be all equal, you know, equally divided, which I think it looks the best. But then I put it at an angle, so maybe if I angled some of those up a little bit, it would give me a little bit more room to weld, but I guess it worked. I think that's going to be plenty strong, and probably, dare I say, even stronger than the factory setup, since we're tying in such a large area of the frame and the bottom side of the frame as well. So hopefully that's strong enough. We're never going to have any problem. I like to overbuild things, especially when you're doing something that's not factory, just to kind of give you a little bit more insurance. But with that, I guess we just have to let it cool, put the bushings in it, and bolt everything up, and we should be four-wheel drive swap. Now, I still have to notch the cross member, and I did take out this cross member here because it was just bolted in right here, and I am going to end up notching this a little bit, and I might have to clearance it for the drive shaft. We'll see once we get the transfer case and the drive shaft in place. But for now, I think we're pretty well on our way to getting this thing full drive swap. So I'm going to let this stuff cool and get the bushings in it and see if we can bolt this axle up, and it will be installed. All right, well, I have the bushings installed and the leaf spring shackles, and everything turned out great. I'm really happy with how this turned out. So the axle is completely installed. There's nothing more to do with this other than clearance that cross member, and then we got to figure out the steering box situation. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing there yet. It's kind of going to be a pain to figure out which box is going to work best and where to mount it, but I think it will. I think everything's going to work once I get a plan going. I'll just be able to knock it out. We might be cutting that cross member up quite a bit and boxing it back in, but that in the end, that's not a big deal. We can do that. There are little spots in the frame I still have to fix, like that little hole right there that somebody cut with a torch, and back here, the original cab bushings were completely shot. These are different ones, and the cab was actually riding in the frame there, and it almost wore all the way through the frame. So I'm going to weld that up and grind that down so we get some strength back in that frame and it's not a weak spot. But other than that, we have to clearance that cross member and start mounting the engine and transmission, the 7.3 Godzilla. That's going to be fun. I think we're getting on almost an hour on this video already, so I'm going to cut it off here, and we're going to do that on another episode. I try to keep these videos a little bit shorter. I might have talked a little bit too much on this video. So if you guys are still watching, thanks for watching. I really appreciate everybody watching these videos and getting to bring everybody along on these projects I have and share my love with these trucks with you guys. And thanks for watching, everyone. We're going to cut it off here on this truck. I hope you enjoyed the full drive swap on this 67 crew project. And maybe it might help some guys if you're wanting to do something like this on your own project. If it did, give me a thumbs up and let me know down in the comments. But I'll see you guys in the next one. We're going to catch back up on this truck when we start engine swapping it. So that'll be a fun episode. So hit subscribe so you can see that. Give me a thumbs up if you like this project. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.